Okay, this special study session is now in session. Karen here? No? Who's going to call roll?
So, Councilmember Davis,
Here.
Councilmember Fricke,
Here.
Councilmember Cassis,
So, I'm here.
Vice Chair Atkin,
Present.
Chair Bukowski.
Here. Okay, we have public comment. Anybody in the audience wish to speak on anything not on the study session agenda? Okay, seeing none. We have the Papermill project. I'm going to have to step down for this because I have a conflict of interest. So, Ruth, you want to take this over?
Okay.
And just
And
for the
Mayor, your
record,
conflict is based on living within 500 feet of the project, is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
thank you.
Meru, are you going to introduce this?
Good evening, council members. This is a study session for a redevelopment project of a property commonly known as Papermill project. It is located at the southeast corner of Powell and Hollis Street. To get you oriented here, this is Powell right here, and Hollis. It's also bounded on the south by Stanford and Doyle towards the east. Currently, there are two existing buildings. On the western portion is a stucco building. It's 1 to 3 stories, and on the western portion is a brick building. The two buildings are divided by an asphalt driveway with parking on either side. These buildings were built in 1939, around 1939, and then renovated later on in the early 70s, where this asphalt driveway was created at that time. To quickly show you some pictures, this is the stucco building that I was talking about at the corner. This is the corner of Powell and Hollis. This is along Hollis, and this is Hollis and Stanford. This building, as a part of the project, will be completely demolished. This is not a significant building. This is the brick building, or the paper mill building, that I was talking about earlier. It's on the western portion. And this is considered a significant building by our preservation ordinance. And as part of this project, this building will be partially demolished. This is the reason why this project is in front of the council, because it involves a partial demolition of a significant building. What they are planning to do is to retain 3 sides of the brick facade. This is the Stanford side, this is the Hollis side, and this is the Doyle side, and add on to that facade. I would like to add at this point, since we have the pictures up, the project went to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, and one of their comments was that they suggested that the Powell Street facade need not be retained. Their reasoning was that if this was not retained, then there was an opportunity for the new building to be pushed back and create a larger, broader sidewalk. Right now, the sidewalk is about 8 feet, and their suggestion was, but the new building, the new wall could move in. Now, this is sort of a trade-off between city's preservation goals vis-a-vis city's desire to make its streets pedestrian-friendly. One of the advantages of retaining the wall, the Powell facade, is that this, the proposed development, what's behind this wall is going to be a parking area. And it's really difficult in terms of new design to create attractive facades for garages. So that's one advantage of keeping it where it is. In addition, this is the corner of Powell and Stanford. The proposed project uses the existing doors, a lot of the existing doors, including this one, into the design. And so this would be in the proposed project entry to the lobby. And if this facade is not kept, then this would also be, would have to be removed. This sort of is it's faded out, so this sort of gives you this the Hollis side, and this is the Doyle side. Moving to the actual project, what they are proposing are 2 buildings. It's sort of similar to the configuration that exists today, and this is Building A, and it will be a 4-story with 1 subgrade of parking. On the first level, you'll have on the perimeter retail restaurant space, about 10,000 square feet of that. Along Powell, there will be flex space, and this would be the leasing office. It will, and the interior of the building would be a parking spaces. This building would accommodate about 103 residential units. Building B is also a 4-story building with 1 level of parking. And along the Doyle Street, you would have live work, and also along the park, you would have live work spaces. And it would accommodate about 63 residential units in 3 levels above it. So in terms of the project amenities, the project will include a swimming pool, a fitness center. There will also be a resident business center. There will be a community room. And as part of the project, staff had asked the applicant to look into creating a public park in the existing parking lot that we have. And I'll speak to this a little bit in more detail later on. So this is again the ground level. The vehicular ingress and egress will occur from Pavel, right here, as well as Doyle Street. So the arrows are pretty straightforward in terms of how the movement of the cars would take place. This shows the pedestrian circulation. The blue lines basically show how the pedestrians can move around. Of note is this corner where there'll be a staircase going straight up to the podium. The same thing along the Parkside. There'll be a staircase going straight up to the podium. And the purple or the orange stars are various lobbies. There's another lobby right here as well. These are lobbies to the buildings, and there's one here which is not shown right now. This is a typical floor plan. The units are organized in both the buildings around a C-shaped courtyard. And like I'd said, it's a mix of studios, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom. And you can see on your slide the different breakdown in each building. So you have a total of about 166 units, and about 66% of them will be 1-bedroom. And the rest would be 30, like it's 2 bedrooms, 10 3-bedrooms, and about 15 studios. In terms of sizes, the 3-bedroom units are roughly around 1,200 square feet. The 2-bedroom units are over 1,000 square feet. The 1-bedroom units are around 850, 900 square feet. And the studios range between 550 to about 650 square feet. This is the elevation along Pavel of both the buildings, and this is the south side around the public park. I'm not going to be spending too much time on the design itself. I'm going to let the applicant do that. I know they have an extensive slide show for you. But I'll quickly go through the various elevations here. This is Building A. And this is the Powell Street, this is the Hollis Street. The height of the building varies, as you can see. It reaches a maximum of 55 feet. It varies between 59 feet 8 inches to a maximum of 55. This is the Building B. As you can see, this is the brick facade that has been retained. And then you have new construction on top. Again, the height varies, reaching a maximum of 55 feet. In terms of conformity to zoning standards, it is in the mixed-use district where all uses require use permit. And the proposed uses are permitted in the MU zone with the conditional use permit. In terms of density, 45 units per acre is allowed by right, which can be increased to 60 units with a use permit, and that can be bumped to 75 units with the affordable housing bonus. The proposed density is 72 units per acre, and therefore the project will require use permit for the density. In terms of height, this is in a 40-feet height district where you can increase the height to 55 feet with a use permit. Like I had mentioned previously, the height varies between 49 feet and 55 feet, and therefore it will require a conditional use permit. In terms of FAR, the project is well below the FAR that is allowed by right, and therefore it complies. In terms of parking, these are the various parking calculations for different kinds of different type of residential units, including visitor parking, live, work, and flex parking, retail and restaurant parking, and when it's all said and done, the project does comply with the parking requirements. Just as a note, the project will be sharing the parking between the visitor parking with the retail restaurant users. In terms of permits required, it will require demolition permit, use permit for use, density and height, and design review. In terms of Planning Commission feedback, this project has had extensive feedback from the Planning Commission. We had 3 study sessions, 2 of them last year in August and October. After that, three commissioners, along with outside design consultant, worked with the applicant on the design, and then there was, and the applicant proposed the revised design in December at the Planning Commission. The commission was generally satisfied at this point with the design, and they expressed the need for more three-bedroom units. And in response to that, the applicant has revised that for the council and increased their five-bedroom units to now it's increased to 10 three-bedroom units. Going back to the park, at the request of staff, the applicant was asked to propose a park for the public parking, public and private parking, south of the proposed site. The area in blue, light purple, is city property, and the area in red are private, legal private parcels. And you have public parking along the perimeter of the city, and then you have private parking, and this is about 41 spaces here. Several schemes were discussed. One of the schemes that was discussed and that was incorporated by the applicant in their plans for the study session is to create a park and have perpendicular parking for the private uses, the 41 perpendicular parking spaces. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee was not too happy with this proposal, mainly because they were not sure whether having perpendicular parking spaces along a bike route would be the most efficient way of creating parking. However, as a response to that, we do have a 5-foot buffer between the parking spaces and the road. In addition, you could have a curved curb or a valley gutter, which would sort of caution cars coming in and out of the parking spaces. In addition, this scheme creates the largest park space, both in terms of width and the total acreage. So that's what you see in the plans, in the landscape plans that was submitted as part of your package. So these are the 41 spaces right here. In addition, one should also know that these will be private parking spaces, which means that they'll be typically used by employees who would come and park, maybe go out for lunch, so it'll be a rather low turnover. Also, it would have very low usage during weekends, since these are typically for employees. An alternate scheme that was considered was to create the private parking in a sort of a separate parcel and away from the road, and then create a tree-lined buffer between the road and the parking spaces. And this would require some driving aisles. There'll be 2 spots of ingress and egress. And what this would create is it would remove the parking spaces away from the road, but it would also reduce the width of the park as well as the total acreage of the park. A sort of a similar scheme was to create the parking spaces away from the park and between the road and the tree-lined buffer. This creates the need for a larger maneuvering aisle, so it's slightly smaller than the previous scheme. In addition, the council asked staff to look into relocating the parking spaces on the south side of Stanford, and this is the diagram. So you have the park, and the parking spaces are relocated here. However, due to a number of reasons, there are a number of loading, unloading zones because of the school, as well as red zones. There are also some parallel parking spots which would be removed.
Wait, I lost you there. There's a number of what? Would you go back?
Well,
to it?
there's a school loading zone is right here. It creates, it's not, you cannot totally use these.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And so what you're creating, it's not possible to create a total of 41, which would be lost as a result of the park. In addition, there would be an offset in the road as well that would need to be created. In terms of next steps, we have hired LSA, our environmental consultant, to prepare the environmental document. Initial study, mitigated negative declaration will be prepared. They have started their work. And that will be followed by a planning commission hearing, which will provide a recommendation to the council, and it will come to the council maybe sometime, if everything goes well, in late summer. In terms of recommendation, staff would like the council to provide us direction regarding the preferred parking scheme adjacent to the park, which one do you prefer, as well as whether you're okay to go ahead with the diversified holdings who are the property owners of the private parking, and there'll be some exchange of real property interests, so if that is okay or not. Provide comment, of course, on the project proposal and design, and as well as provide comments on the bicycle pedestrian committee suggestions. That concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thanks,
Otherwise-
Miru. Is there any members of the public who wish to speak to this project?
We also have a presentation by the applicant. You
Okay.
may want to see that first.
Is that, which differs, I presume, from the staff?
It's a little more design-oriented.
Okay. Come on up, Amir or Rick. After the applicant.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for agreeing to speak with us tonight. Kava's going to get up in a few minutes and talk more about the design and project specifics. There you go.
Thank you.
I just wanted to come up and introduce myself, and also, given the amount of time that we have, just to quickly set the context for how we got here. We started this process about 14 months ago in reaching out to staff after we had purchased the property, and I think actually before we had purchased the property. And over the last 14 months, have spoken with planning commissioners, with community members, the community at large in a community meeting, and with through multiple study sessions, have gotten a lot of feedback about the elements of a successful project. And what that means to us is, what are the community benefits that would make sense for a project like this in exchange for giving us the conditional use permits that we're asking for that allow for the additional density and the additional height. And so tonight what you're going to see is our best effort to date at incorporating all the feedback that we've received over the last 14 months. It's not going to be perfect by any means, but what we ask for tonight is that you provide us with enough feedback so that as we're preparing for a formal presentation and application in May, that we're able to put something together that reconciles with both what we've heard from the Planning Commission, from the community, and ultimately from you guys. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kava. As you guys have questions, Kava and I will probably tag team in answering your questions for you. Thanks. Finally got this to work.
Hello, good evening, council members. Miru did such a good job that I think I'll just quickly go through this, unless if you stop me and ask me to sort of explain and sort of stop. So existing, as you can see, this is actually before elevation 22 was quite built, and even the gas station wasn't quite done yet back then. Obviously, you see the park and the extension that we're proposing in this aerial. Site plan, as Miru mentioned, we did, I think that this area that's now a parking lot used to be a street. I'm not quite sure, but it looks like it probably was at some point, or it was a public right-of-way, but we're keeping it, and I think it's sort of a nice thing that sort of keeps the view corridor through the, if we had sort of attached the two buildings together, it would have looked like a very, very huge building. So I think that was a decent move to put them into the separate buildings. Something that I'm not sure came across that clearly is that Building A has an entirely sunken parking level under it. Am I doing something, or
It's not you.
You're fine.
it's
Keep
not
going.
me?
Keep going.
Okay, thanks. So there's a totally sunken underground parking level under Building A. We've sort of activated the edges of the building as much as humanly possible. We've given quite a bit of attention to the corner at Hollis and Powell. As you know, it's not a very friendly for the pedestrians, as it is now, given the sort of amount of traffic that goes there. But we've put a pretty generous entry off of that corner, so there's a set of stairs that come up right through there. And the idea is to actually have a piece of art displayed in that sort of area that we've set back from the corner. We also have a way to get in and out of the parking area from the center of the building off of Hollis, and that will allow for people that are parked back here to get in and out on the street and into these spaces instead of having to go all the way around in this direction or all the way around in that direction. What else can I tell you on this side? You know, we don't really have any long or tall walls or any buildings on this edge, so this amenity that really belongs to the project won't be seen easily. Sort of there will be visual access from the park. The second floor, as Miru mentioned, is actually second, third, and fourth floors are all arranged around these two courtyards in each building, and it's kind of not so easy to see the scale of this thing, but this width between the two buildings is actually what a right-of-way normally would be, the width of it, about 60 feet. These courtyards are about 75 feet wide, so they're very, very generous in their widths. And obviously the length is about twice as much in the case of Building A, so it's a fairly large space in the middle. And it opens towards the south, which is a nice thing, nice solar access into the courtyard. These are the more sort of detailed design of them, and the one thing that's been sort of mentioned is that these lines aren't full walls that you can't walk through, so they don't cut up the area of the courtyards into smaller chunks. You can actually walk through them. They're trellises. Third floor, and then fourth floor. And as you can see, the building gets a little lighter on the fourth floor. We have taken some of the building's mass away as it goes up to where it sits against the park. And then this we added on to the set just so that you see, this is the roof plan, and it shows the height of the building. And you can see that a majority of the building, which is, you know, these are the heights of the buildings, are under 50 feet. And there are just certain areas just for variety and richness that we've popped up a little bit. And even with those, we're within what's allowed with a use permit. So we start with the brick building. This is the Powell Street elevation. And as you can see, the brick building is fairly tall. It's about 18 feet, actually 20 feet tall. And so it's a fairly tall ground floor. We've done our best to incorporate it and sort of have it blend in. The door-facing facade, which is the east-facing, actually this is the door that Miru mentioned. That's into one of the lobbies. And then there's another door on this side which has a beautiful arch on top of it. That's also another lobby door. So we're sort of trying to use some of the entries into the project as sort of the memory of the old building. South-facing, this is on the edge of the park, and you can see how much lighter the building looks because of the setbacks. We also have these trellises that we've designed into the project to sort of bring the garden and the park up into the courtyard and part of the design. This is the west elevation of Building A on Hollis. This is the floor plan that we've put up right up against the elevation just to show you how much movement there is. That seemed to be a very sort of desirable thing from the staff and a lot of the people that we've spoken with, and we've sort of accommodated that idea. The Powell Street side has a similar feel. I mean, there's quite a bit of different things that are going on, and I won't take up your time going through every one of them, but I hope these images tell the story. The south side of that building A does pretty much the same thing with, it looks a lot lighter, mainly because the courtyard's there, but we also have stepped down the building as it gets close to the center of the building, and you can see the stair that Miru mentioned. There's access up to the podium from the parking, from the park. So an image of the building from the corner of Powell and Hollis. Obviously, this is a very, very important intersection in the city. And this is a day version of it, and we have a sort of a dusk version of it with which shows the light emanating out of it. And that, in essence, is the presentation.
Thanks, Kava.
You're welcome.
I'll open up to public comment, and I'd ask staff to time for 3 minutes per speaker. So I think I see 2 people want to speak at least. Joshua?
Just borrow this.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Joshua Simon. I'm here tonight as a neighbor and as a school board member. My kids keep asking me, are there kids in the building next door to play with? And actually, it was at one of Kava's buildings where we actually met some of the kids in the new building because the doorways opened right out onto the greenway. And we were walking by on the greenway and met the kids, and you know, we have new friends in the neighborhood and building community. And I think this project is a terrific opportunity for that kind of community building. It's got an opening onto a park. It's right next to a park designed for kids. It's at the entrance of Spur Alley, which is one of the safe routes to get to the schools for kids to go on their bicycle. So I'd really encourage, if there's any project in Emeryville that really should have 3-bedroom units, I think this is one of them. I think it's an opportunity for affordable rental housing in a location where kids and families can walk to school and work. And I'd love to be able to meet the people when they move in there and not have it be a place that folks drive in and disappear. So having a way for kids to be able to run out to the park and having direct access to the park, I think will make a difference.
Josh, before you leave, could I ask, I don't know if you're aware, they've increased the number of 3 bedrooms from 2 or 3 up to 10. Are you suggesting that we seek more than 10 units out of here?
That's terrific news. I was still back at 2 or 3,
Yeah,
so that's great news. Thank you. And I'm just encouraging if there's ways to have it be, to design those units to activate the park more, as you did at elevation 22.
Talk into the microphone because we're being broadcast.
I think if it could be done as it was at elevation 22, which I think works very well with the Greenway, and many of the other projects along the Greenway that are designed to really be a place for people to gather. There's been a number of studies that show when doorways face each other, people meet each other, and I think it's great potential in this development. Thank you.
And we could put fire poles from the 3-bedroom units out to the park so the kids could slide down. Huh?
That might happen if we don't have a doorway.
Brian Donahue, 4333 Holden Street. First, I'd like to speak briefly about the notion of the facade being saved. And I'm not a big fan of the facadist sort of philosophy that's being applied in Emeryville, because I think it sort of makes a mockery of these older buildings. And let's not kid ourselves. This is not adaptive reuse. This is merely keeping a facade for like the sake of it. And it's sort of, I think we would do better to tear this building down, the brick building, than to merely save a mockery of the historic building in order to free up the architect to be able to have a more interesting building. I think that this unnecessarily constrains the architect. The staff said here something about the brick facades. Now, realize I'm in the building industry. That's what I do to make a living. And the staff has maintained here that the brick facades can never be rebuilt with the same skill and craftsmanship And that's why this Bicycle Pedestrian Committee's recommendation should not go ahead, because it could never be rebuilt with it. Now, that, I don't know what basis of fact is that, how, I disagree with that. I think it could be rebuilt with the same skill and craftsmanship, and I don't know what basis you make that statement on. So I guess this is directed at Charlie.
Do you have any other comments?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And I'd like to talk about the retail a little bit. What we're getting in this town now is boarded up retail. We keep forcing these developers to put retail in, and then they just sit empty and idle, and that really drags down the population. It's psychologically bad. It's bad for our city to have boarded up retail. So I maintain a new, out of the box kind of thinking, where we get the developer to, the rent starts going down as the months progress with the thing sitting idle and empty, until you get down to $1 a month or whatever. And I think we should start investigating some other scheme to make it so we don't have boarded up retail that we have. And the last thing I wanted to say was I want to concur with Josh about the family-friendly housing. Now, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, we are building this Emeryville Center for Community Life, and this thing could become a boondoggle without places for families to live in Emeryville. So what we need to do is we already have plenty of this kind of living situation. It suits sort of a demographic group, people in their 30s, 40s, singles, married couples without children. Now they've thrown in a few 3-bedroom units here, but what we want are real family-friendly housing, and this isn't it. What is family-friendly housing are townhouses. Now we could do something like this with maybe townhouses below and maybe condos above, but by a townhouse I mean separate entrance on the street with a little private backyard, a place where you can put your kids and so they can play in a little private backyard, just as they do in other cities. Nora, I notice you're rolling your eyes at me. Other cities have done it, and we can do it here in Emeryville too. We need to have the kind of housing that families will want to locate here.
That's your time, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
So I have an outstanding question to Charlie about
Any other members of the public wish to speak? Okay, we'll have a time for staff response after
All right, thank you.
council comments. I have a number of comments. I'd like to ask my colleagues if I can lead off with some.
Absolutely.
All right. So there's a couple of things. The additional green space that's proposed in the second as an extension to the existing park isn't really more park. It's just a green. It's basically a greenway. So with that in mind, I would like to see the 2 and 3 bedrooms rearranged around the courtyards completely redone to have more active space, such as a place to put up a net and a fungible space. So you could have a volleyball net there one day and a badminton net there another day, or a tetherball, or a climbing structure. Right now in the public park, there's a hoop and a backboard to hit a tennis ball against, and the basketball hoop gets very well used, but you have to go further up out of sight of these proposed units before you get to swings and other amenities. So for us to have this really be family-friendly housing, I think the larger bedroom units should be located around the courtyards. The courtyards completely redone just so that they just don't look good, but they're actually used and that parents can look out and see their kids playing in a safe and closed area. There are no green building elements proposed that I saw in the staff report. No solar panels, no commitment to using recycled building materials, fly ash in the construction, or in the foundation or whatever. So I'd like to see more green building elements, which is consistent with what our climate change task force is developing. And then also the County Housing Authority has let us know that our rents in Emeryville are the most expensive rents in Alameda County. And so given that this would be a rental project, how can we assure that the larger bedrooms have a greater share of affordability built into them so that we can actually have some stability in families that move into them. So there really wasn't much of a discussion about how many affordable units. Well, it's subject to the affordable housing set aside, but we haven't really had a talk about which units and where they would be located. And lastly, I favor Scheme 3 for the diversified holdings parking. Any other council members?
Yeah, Ruth,
Yeah.
I'd like to second very strongly what Vice Mayor Atkins said about the green building principles. I would certainly like to see that when you come forward with your application. I have another, this sounds like a nitpicky question, but I want to see, and Kava, if you could come up and show me, where are the moving trucks going to be parked when they move people in and out of these apartments? Maybe you don't remember, but we used to have an outfit called Transo Envelope on Hollis Street, and they would move their big trucks out and block traffic. I want to know where those moving trucks are going to be.
Right. We've actually moved them around quite a bit, trying to figure out the best spot, because they need to be near both, elevators and so on. So we've actually looked at using, using an area that's in front of this door as one of the spots where people can just walk down this into the lobby of this building and up that elevator, or around the...
How is the big moving truck going to get in there?
Well, we're hoping that they're not 65-foot semi-trailers.
Well, we have a lot of them out at Watergate, and they block
They're
the
really that
streets
big?
out at Watergate. How big are they, Dick? Yeah.
They're the big
They're
ones.
humongous.
Right.
And
we moved
that's
them...
the kind of thing I don't want to see on Hollis Street, and I don't want to see it on
yeah.
Powell Street.
Oh, it'll be a
And
disaster.
how you guys work
right.
it out.
Okay.
But does the rest of the council concur with me on that?
Well, they can't be on, they have to be off of Powell and Hollis.
Off of, this
Right.
is what I'm trying to get across here. Moving along, if you got that message. The other issue is on this, the first building with the brick facades. I was at the Bike Ped Committee when they were talking about that narrow sidewalk, and that the sidewalk would have to stay narrow if we keep the brick facade. I happen to also be anti-facadism. I don't believe that it serves any purpose to retain that brick wall along Powell Street, and I'm not too sanguine about the brick wall along either Stanford or Doyle. I would like the Planning Commission to take another look at this whole idea of facadism, and then go over and take a field trip to 1401 Park, a perfect example of facadism that doesn't work. Apologies to the architect. The intent here, of course, is to utilize this extraordinarily valuable space in a better way, a higher and best use, and to make sure that the pedestrian experience coming from Hollis Street and moving east along Powell Street doesn't start out nice and broad and then narrow down to that tiny little sidewalk. That doesn't work, and I hope everybody addresses that, and I hope they address maintaining these brick facades. It's gone down the wrong path. And then on the park itself, we're going to probably go through many different manifestations of this, but from my perspective, the more green space we have there, the better. However you configure it. Don't put the automobile parking as the priority. Put the green space as a priority and fit the parking around it. And I think the Transportation Committee, if I'm not mistaken, has taken another look at that along Stanford those reserved spaces for the school. There must be a better way to get these people in, the kids in and out of the school. They have a drive-through. It's been my observation they don't use that to its full capacity. And we got to take another look at that. And I think that's the extent of my comments. I really am going to hate to see that building on the corner of Powell and Hollis go. I think that's a beautiful building. What can I say? Go ahead, Dave.
Any other council members?
Okay, let me talk about the parking first with this green space. I don't think that that's a good design. That design of the perpendicular parking is what we have on the east side of Pete's Coffee. And this would be a little bit different in that there would be a meandering path, but a lot of people are going to just continue walking behind the cars. They'll be used to walking next to the street where the sidewalk currently is. I think that there's too much effort being placed on trying to save these parking spaces. My solution would be to condemn those spaces. There's a lot of parking on Spur Alley, and the property the owner that owns these spaces could contract to park on Spur Alley. It's going to look very, very strange to have private parking spaces perpendicular off of a public street. It's bad urban design. The brick building, I think that if we're serious about saving these beautiful buildings, which I agree with Nora is a beautiful building, then we should save it. I agree with Nora that greater density is a good thing, but if you embrace greater density here, then we will save no old buildings in the city, because that push for greater density will exist at every single parcel, because the land is valuable throughout the city. So I would save the building. I would not allow for something to be built on top of it. I agree with Nora that 1401 Park is an example of that. It does not work. You can incorporate an old building with something new, like this building is an old building, and there's a new building next to it. And I'm not an architect, but I believe that works. I believe it works to have a modern glass building next to an old building such as this. Another example is at the Louvre. I think that IMP did a great job there, putting something very modern in the midst of something with a completely different design. But crowding on top, I have not seen in the past to work well, and we have an example in Emeryville of not working well. So my desire would be to save the building and have it used, not gut the building, have it used as is. Now, if that was not the will of the city council, then yeah, I would agree that the better would be to tear it down, but I think the best would be to save it. Let me talk about the 3-bedroom units. I find this very similar to our desire to have retail to activate the street. The retail that we're putting on San Pablo and this would be on Hollis. Yeah, it could very well be that Brian's right. It's going to be not used as retail for a long time. But if you embrace the idea that eventually it will succeed, the retail will succeed, then this is why you build it now. You build it now so that the point of success, the point that things change, will occur before the building is replaced. And so it has to be in that building now. And so that's why, for example, there's emphasis placed on constructing not high-end retail, but retail that's attractive, not with a high ceiling. The 3-bedroom units are doing the same thing in essence. The 3-bedroom units are being put in there with the expectation that the school district will be a thriving success and that people will come to Emeryville as they do come to Albany and Piedmont because the school system is the best. And there's a difference between how we're treating the retail and how we're treating the three-bedroom units. The retail, yes, is what we want, high ceilings, activating the street. The three-bedroom units are not that because they are not what I think families need, and that is access to the outside, access to getting outside quickly with the stroller to take a walk when an infant is fussy. So I see an analogous situation where for the three-bedroom units, they're being built with low ceiling retail, and so I would prefer that the three-bedroom units be closer to this greenway. And let me talk about a couple of examples. Somebody mentioned elevation 22. Elevation 22 is certainly better than a standard condo building with like Bridgecourt where it's all parking on the ground floor. But the problem is that a lot of these units are putting the car on the ground floor, and so I don't see that much activity of these units right at the Greenway, elevation 22, or Liquid Sugar, city limits. One example I think that should be replicated more is Blue Star Corner, where you have people actually living on the ground floor. They're really close. That's, I think, the type of unit that's good for families. Okay, so then the last thing is TDM. I'm wondering what the plan is for TDM with the project. Anybody have thought about this? Okay, do you have a plan? Is there going to be what conditions of approval are going to address my concern about TDM?
Well, I would imagine that staff will put together a list of conditions of approval as that dictated by the council. We try to communicate the steps that we're going to take with respect to alleviating some of the concerns that you mentioned for traffic.
What steps are you going to take?
Well, for starters, we certainly will work towards having a car share parking included inside of our parking, so that as that service expands, there's an opportunity to park those cars within the property.
That's going to be in the conditions of approval.
If you guys write them.
Let me just preface my questions. I was in this chamber a year and a half ago, and a person in similar posture as yourself assured me that his project would include all these different things, and he was fairly specific. The project came back for approval a year later, and none of these things was in the conditions of approval. And they said, well, they'll make every attempt to do so, but it disappeared. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy to hear car share is an element, and I would urge you to put it in the conditions of approval. The problem is that you need to decide, well, how many spaces are you going to set aside for car share? Let me ask.
Charlie, hang on a second. Charlie, isn't it true that conditions of approval would come in the next step, that tonight is really just to get input around design elements?
Right. The conditions of approval will be drafted by staff, and of course, this project will go to the Planning Commission first for a recommendation before it comes to you, so the Planning Commission may have some suggested modifications to the conditions, and you may wish to amend them as well when it gets to you. In addition, as Miro indicated, we're having a mitigated negative declaration prepared under CEQA, and there may be mitigation measures that will come out of that, if there are any potential traffic or parking impacts identified, there may be mitigations that would be incorporated in the conditions of approval.
So tonight's not really an opportunity to talk about conditions of approval, but you're on alert. about what we're going to be looking for.
I'm
Noted.
not done. Okay, let me ask you about transit passes. Are you going to provide free transit passes to all the residents, everyone associated with the project?
That's a condition, that would be a condition of approval.
I object
I-
to this, Mayor, Vice Mayor. This meeting, this study session was to be focused on the design. It's premature to be talking about conditions of approval, and I object to continuing this discussion, and I certainly object to badgering this fellow, pardon the expression, before it's timely or right. You're going to be really dragged over the coals by the Planning Commission on these TDM measures. That will be the time to discuss it. I think we have an agenda here, and we should move the agenda.
I would like to finish. Can I please finish? It's not going to take time.
No, it's
going to
inappropriate.
It's
take,
inappropriate, John.
well, these are the things that I care about this project. I don't
And
see,
you'll have a chance to talk about them when the project comes back.
this is my opportunity to provide this project some guidance that I think is important. Many of these things can affect the design of the parking structure. So if I could just continue, it will not take that much time. Our debate is taking longer than my questions.
This is a point of order. We are here to discuss the design, not the conditions of approval.
Well,
And I would ask the Vice Mayor to move the agenda. Do I have the support of the rest of the council?
Whatever.
Okay,
So,
it won't
so
take long.
So, John, I'll limit you to 3 minutes.
About 5.
Okay, set the timer. Your time's running.
I'm waiting for this man to come back to the microphone. So are you going to provide free transit passes for all the residents?
Not part of our plan, no.
Okay. I think you should, because otherwise everyone's going to drive.
Okay.
Are you going to provide, if I rent one of these apartments, how many spaces that comes with the apartment?
Well, what you're getting at is whether or not we'd be willing to unbundle the parking from the rental of the units, yes, we'd be willing to consider that. And that will go away towards making sure that only those who need parking are using it.
Okay. And so how are you going to set the rent for those spaces? Okay.
Those are market
Because
rentals, so we would just look at what the market is.
You just charge what the market will bear for
Yes, sir.
parking? Okay. Are you going to allow a person who's not a resident to park in the parking? And the reason I ask this is because this plan includes eliminating parking spaces. I mean, currently that green space includes private parking, right? If I drove on, I can't park on a private parking space, but there's public parking there.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot how many spaces there are, but there are quite a few. By taking away those public parking spaces, it would create a market for parking, or people are going to park in the neighborhoods. And that's not going to work unless there's a residential parking permit program. If there is a residential parking permit program, then I think that it's reasonable to provide somewhere for people to park. They could pay, but they should have a place to park. So here's my question. My question is, are you going to have some way to allow someone to park in your garage and pay for that privilege?
Well, you are putting me on the spot.
Okay, now
we hadn't
let me
considered
just-
it, but can
and
I
let me-
just say one thing? Because your premise is that we're taking parking spots away from the community, and I would like just to note that the bulk of those community parking spaces or public spaces are currently used by the employees that work in those two buildings currently. So as those uses disappear, the demand for that parking disappears. And we've driven by that area on the weekends to see what the parking need, so to speak, is, and it's considerably less than what exists during the weekday.
Yeah, I understand, but I anticipate that the demand for parking is just going to keep going up. There's the new office building on Hollis. There's a proposal for an office building on the east side of Hollis, and I would encourage you to really take advantage of flex parking by allowing public parking in your parking garage. Now, the reason I bring this all up now is because you cannot do that later unless you plan, unless you design that garage in such a way that allows for that, and how it is that you're going to collect the fee for parking. You know, it will be much easier for you to do that up front, and I think that you would have a better idea of what the market will bear for those parking spots if you opened it up. Now, the greatest challenge, of course, is how do you provide security for the residents, and that's a nut to crack. But I think the advantages of providing for public parking, the problems can be overcome, and they're great advantages. Are there any other TDM elements that you're considering?
What I was looking for was some notes, because we had an email exchange in which I tried to outline the bulk of the TDM measures that we were taking, and I would be happy to. Let me just go through what we were considering for the project, just so that it's noted, and then you can give us some feedback on what you think. We've talked about unbundling the parking. We've talked about co-sponsoring community awareness programs to make them aware of alternate transportation methods, and doing that in conjunction with other community activities that are going on. We've also talked about acting as a facilitator for those who are interested in car share, or having some kind of a route sharing, so that if someone, for example, works in San Francisco, if they want to commute on a daily basis with someone else, we can begin to act as a facilitator for something like that. Let's see, secure bicycle parking as well in the garage, and I think that's it.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks a lot.
Sure.
Dick, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, thank you. I have, I think, 6 areas of comment. Overall, I think this is very well designed and well thought out, and I appreciate a lot of the features of the project. As I expressed when I met with the team yesterday, my biggest disappointment was finding out that this project didn't include the next parcel of land to the east where the water tower is, because on the original plan that came forward, there was more density in the building to the west, and what we were going to get for that was townhouses on the parcel that has the water tower. So while I think this is well designed, I'm also of the belief that townhouses are really what we need to figure out how to get into this town, and this is a project in its initial conception that had townhouses, so I'm sorry to lose those. Going on from there, I agree with the Bike Ped Committee that in terms of the brick building, and I'm sort of a compromise. I like the brick facades, and I think we ought to try to save them where it makes sense. I think it makes sense to try to save the facades on the east and south sides of the building, but I think that clearly we've got an opportunity to make a wider sidewalk on the easternmost building, and so I think we've got to pull that back. And what I would like to see done is I would like to see you reuse the brick on that level of facade, and if it's possible, I realize right now you've got parking at that level, but if it's possible to have some stoops along that building on the northern end of it, to kind of mirror what's going on across the street, I think that would be good. Now, in exchange for that, I would be willing to give you a little more height on the building to the west, to get the number of units to sort of buy what I'm trying to get is more of a street activation in the northern building. So, and there may be some way to configure it so that works. So that would be, so the trade-off for me is I want the sidewalk in the northern building wider, but I'd like to keep as much of the facade on the other walls as possible. In terms of the park, and I agree with Ruth, it's really just a greenway, but I think we need to make it as wide as we can, so I want to see the 60-foot retained. And I'm against the perpendicular parking. I'm okay with the angle parking. That means losing a few spaces. I think the perpendicular is just too hard for people to maneuver, and it's going to make it difficult for bikes to get by. The angle's tough enough as it is, but I definitely wouldn't want to go along with perpendicular parking there. And I don't want to make the inset because it takes away too much of the green. In terms of the park, Ruth, I would tend to agree with you that we need to get developers to put the kids' stuff inside the development, but we have a unique situation here where we are adjacent to at least a greenway, and we've already got some kid uses to the north. So what I'd like to see looked at here is to get some community input about this 60-foot wide strip, about what age of kids we want to entertain there, and see if we can't bring that stuff out into the park, because then it's there for everybody in the neighborhood to use. And I think there's a real benefit to that. It isn't going to be just private for these kids. And that's not to say there couldn't be part of the courtyards that were for kids, but I'd like to see that 60-foot strip not in bocce ball courts, but unless that's really what the neighborhood wants. But I'd rather push the kid thing out there so that the people with kids from these buildings can interrelate to the neighborhood kids that wouldn't otherwise be able to use it. I've said before that I wouldn't vote for any development that had tandem parking. This has a number of spaces, but it was pointed out to me when I met with the team yesterday that they meet their parking requirements without the tandem spaces. So I guess I can stomach it for this, but I think they're ridiculous spaces, and I think they mostly get used for storage. So maybe with an apartment and rental management, that won't necessarily happen. And last, I'd like to say that I want to make sure, and I didn't talk about this yesterday, but I want to make sure that the bike room is enclosed, because and in Dante, all you need to do is talk to the people that live there, and they had, in essence, in theory, secure bike places. Didn't turn out to be that way, and people just come in and cut the chains. So just chaining up the bikes doesn't do it. They need a room with a lock so that their bikes will be secured. Other than that, I think, it's a well-designed, well-thought-out project, and I look forward to moving forward with it.
All right, so you've gotten feedback from council members, so thank you for coming to this study session. It's adjourned.